All right. Hello, everybody. Tara Bachland here with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, and we have another Becoming the Herbalist episode at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. If you've been hanging around on any of our social media platforms, you've probably seen or heard one of these podcasts before, and they are especially for you if you love herbs and you're trying to figure out how can I make a living doing what I love. And so we've been featuring many of our teachers at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism and many other types of practitioners for you to see how you can carve out a path in doing something that you love with herbalism. Tonight we have Judy Leblein, and she is one of our lovely teachers at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. You may have heard us talking about her plant journeying classes, and she's co-taught herbs A to Z on a number of topics, especially those that kind of have special herbs, maybe that have to do with Ayurveda, and a number of specialty topics she has co-taught with Matthew, and we're looking forward to having her teach some more. So welcome. Thank you, Judy, for making the time to join us tonight and to tell us your story on becoming an herbalist.
Thanks for having me. So, there's so many different ways to come into herbalism, and I came into it in my 30s, and I came into it through gardening and growing food. So I decided to take a class at an herb school in Nevada City called Dry Creek Herb Farm, and there was a class on co-creating with nature, similar to what the Findhorn Institute does in Scotland, where they communicate with the spirit of the elements and the land and the plants to grow and produce volumes of food or herbs. And so I went to this class with my best friend, and as I was checking in, the herb store manager handed me an application for herb school, and she said, "You're going to want this." And I said, "No, I haven't, no, I don't. I have no interest in going to herb school." And she's like, "By the end of the day, you're going to want to go to herb school." So I took the form and I had it with me, and lo and behold, by the end of the day, I wanted to go into herb school. So I signed up and started a 1-year program at the Dry Creek Herb Farm. And it was, life-changing and empowering, as I think working with plants always is. And had no idea why I was doing the program other than I just had interest in it. And then through the classes, I developed a fondness for flower essences, and things just kind of opened up and spiraled from there. I started having just injured animals come to my door at my house, and I would give them flower essences and they would heal up. And then I just had people coming to me for flower essences without even putting it out there that, I wanted to do that type of work. And it just kind of grew from there. And so when I started out, I worked primarily with animals and their people. And the animals would I don't even know how these people found me, because I wasn't advertising. It was just, I think all the stars kind of aligned. And then from doing that, it got really narrow into working with animals that were dying and crossing over. And I developed a skill set about, communicating with animals and helping their people transition, helping the animals transition. So that was the beginning of kind of my herbalism career. And, just did that for a number of years, and then continued to study with anyone I could. I think it's so important to, just get as many different viewpoints around the herbs as you can. And so I studied with everyone I could. It was pre-internet days, so, there was traveling involved, hooking up with herbalists. And through that, and during that time, I met Matt and read his books, and then really got more into what I call plant spirit medicine, communicating with the spirit of the plant, getting to know the plant. And just having the plants tell me how they want to be worked with and how they want to be used. And then I just kind of, that became the central focus of what I did. And then kind of everything kind of revolves around that. And I still do that to this day. And so within that, you know, just taking classes with anything that like sparked an interest. So I delved into Ayurveda and into even like permaculture and, you know, growing. At one point I was growing close to 270 plants, different herbs. I had like a half acre of land I was renting. And I noticed that year I didn't get, you know, catch one cold or anything. And I know it's because I had all the plants in my space. And so I've kind of always deferred to the plants. Even when I teach, I, you know, offer my prayers up and I ask what plant wants to be taught on. And that's how I decide how I'm going to teach like the plant journey classes. And when I have clients come to me, it's very much like an herbal matchmaking. I think people have heard this. You're matching the spirit of the person to the spirit of the plant, bringing the two together to do whatever needs to be done.
Were you always intuitive and in tune with plants in particular?
You know, I think so, but I don't think I said yes to that when I was younger. I mean, I know my room growing up was filled with plants. I was always gardening and growing food when I was younger. I even interned on a farm for a while. So I think I always had what people would say would be like a green thumb. And then it was in the herb school setting that I started to hear like on a different level. And then things just kind of opened up from there.
Do you sense that a person needs to come from a certain lineage to really tune in, or how did you improve that or enhance it?
So you know, my experience with teaching people during the plant journey classes is that everyone is intuitive, and a lot of times we don't recognize that we're intuitive. You know, our gut feelings, that's intuition. We get a knowingness, that's intuition. And so some people, you know, part of it is just learning how the plants speak to you. The plants speak to all of us in a way that, excuse me, in a way that we can always hear and understand. So some people are really visual, some are more auditory, some more just get like those gut feelings. And whatever intuitive doors open in you is the way the plants are going to come speak to you. And then from that, you can learn to open the other doors. But, you know, I think everyone I've met has that ability to connect to the plants and to listen.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to students who say, I'm not getting anything?
No, that's a really good question that happens in class sometimes. So we take a look at, that's why I have people like ingest a little bit of the plant, and this is non-toxic plants, but like do a drop dose of a tincture or even look at the picture. And then I have them look at how their body, their mind, their heart responds to what they're either looking at, what they're holding, or what they've ingested. So the plant will speak to us through stories within our body, within our physiology, and within our psyche. So either memories will come up, or mood shifts will happen, or people will become aware of a certain part of their body. You know, some herbs have organ affinities. And then through that self-observation, kind of like the dots can be connected, and then people can distill the information. And then that's, you know, that's kind of, that is intuition, you know. So it's like reading and knowing what's happening in your body.
Was that a part of your initial training? Was that included, or did that really come later?
That came later. I read a book by an herbalist named Billy Potts, and I've since found out she's passed. She was a I guess, what would be called a wild feminist herbalist from back east. And on the back half of her book, she talked about self-observation and checking in with your body, mind, heart every day. Like, are you cold today? Are you hot today? And, so the beginning, the energetics, hot, cold, wet, dry. Do you feel full? Do you feel empty? What are your aversions today? What are you craving? And from answering those questions, you kind of determine what your constitutional state is on that day. And from that information, you can pick and choose what plants you're going to put into your body or what food. So if you're feeling really cold, you're probably going to crave something warm. So maybe you'll go for, an herb that's more warming. Maybe you'll want more, have a cup of ginger tea or something like that. So that kind of opened the door, that book did. And then I just kind of deep dive into that, I was like always experimenting on myself. And, and then just also saw how other people were relating, to their bodies and to the elements outside them. And it just kind of, to me, it's common sense. And it just makes a lot of sense,
So the animals were showing up at your door first.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Were they like wild animals or just like kind of feral cats and dogs?
It was a range. I had some feral animals, feral cats. It was mostly cats. That would show up injured that I would help nurse back. And then one day I had a mama cat who was pregnant and she was really young, and she kind of begged me to talk to her people to ask to be spayed. And I went down to this neighbor's house who I didn't know and said, yeah, I know your cat's pregnant and this may sound a little weird, but your cat, doesn't want to have any more babies. I think it was the third litter. So the animals just started, I could hear them speak. It was almost like they were speaking English to me, and I could hear them in my head. And then it was relaying the messages the cats had to the people in their lives. So it seemed like I was working with cats, but I think it was more like the cats wanted me to work with their people.
Interesting. So that kind of then bridged the gap to the human, working with humans.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and then connecting people with their pets. And it's the same thing when I work with people with the plants. I always want to have them have a direct connection to whatever they're taking. Happy to help, but it's all about empowering people to trust themselves and know themselves, and take care of themselves and the animals around them or the people around them.
Are there any instances that you recall that the person maybe was a little bit skeptical at first, but then you said something and they're like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, a good example of people's intuition is a lot of times when I was working with clients, and because I was working with deathing, I'd get phone calls at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. In the middle of the night, it was very much crisis. Things were happening, and I would communicate what the animal was sharing with me, and their person would be like, I had that feeling. So a lot of it too is just getting people to trust what their gut instinct is, and knowing that anything that happened between, the person and their animal kind of was already decided upon, like both parties had agreed to like what was going down. So they're, alleviating guilt and fear and all of that. But the culture, we're not really taught to trust ourselves. A lot of us were taught to give up our power to authority, whether our parents, our teachers, government. And so I think a lot of what I found in herbalism is like reclaiming one's own knowingness about what's right for yourself, and listening and trusting that nobody knows you better than you. And I think the plants help us get to know ourselves better and help us in the places where we maybe forgot who we were or where we don't remember.
you had mentioned Fintorn earlier, and I've only heard that in the context of a teacher called Carolyn Mace.
Yes.
And she's a medical intuitive. And, for years and years and years, I've had people ask, how do you do it? How do you do it? And she's, it sounds like you know her and of her, and she's emphatic. She's very blunt and to the point. And she's like, you can do it too. You just have to trust, what you're getting. And she's like, the more you trust it, even those little things, the more you'll get it. And this is not how she said it, but that's my own interpretation.
No, that's totally true. I mean, it's from the simplest thing, from like maybe you're driving to work and you normally go left, but today you're like, I need to go right. And then you ignore that, and then maybe there's a traffic jam or an accident, on the way. So, or, you have a feeling like, oh, I need to call this person, but you don't know why. It's like acting on those, I want to say, those impulses, and then and then seeing how that plays out, and not attaching to outcome, but just kind of observing, observing what happens. And then as you start listening, you'll like more synchronicities show up, and the right people get dropped in front of you for whatever reason. And it's a really powerful way to live, but it does, and I, to this day, I'm pretty good about listening, but there's times that I don't listen to my knowingness. And I think it's a lifelong pursuit, to trust, to have, and you and I were talking earlier about having faith too. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's a bit like walking in the dark, though, too, in an unfamiliar place. It's fine if you're walking in the dark to your bathroom. You usually know what's in your way and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's, life is, there's a lot of new stuff. And you don't know if, okay, you're trusting to go in that direction, but you're still like, okay, is there solid ground?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think, part of that comes into how the information comes through. Usually, I'll give an example from my life. Poison oak. I have been drawn to poisonous plants for years, and I just want to eat them whenever I see them. And I know enough to know that's not a wise thing to do, to start nibbling on toxic plants. So, but there's a message in that, and whether, maybe I'll take, talk to the plant and say, I'm not comfortable taking you, but may I make a flower essence and work with the plant through the flower essence, or meditate, with the plant out in the wild or in the garden. So, we can hear these messages, but we also need to, use our, incorporate our knowingness, our brain and our heart to know, if a toxic plant is calling us, that may not be the best choice, in moderation. But I think when learning about plants, and that's why, I think self-study is great, and I'm a huge self-studier, but I also like classes, because when you're sitting with a group of people, like when we did the plant journey class through the Institute, people may be afraid to speak, but when they do, there's always other people in the class who get the same information. And so it's a way to build your confidence, to study with other people and have these experiences and share experiences. So with everything being online now, with a lot being online now, it gives people an opportunity to study with different teachers and connect with people from different backgrounds and lineages, and learn different techniques and skill set and tools on, how to work with the plants. And it never fails. Like, everyone that I've ever come in contact with may not know what direction they want to go with the plants, but at some point, like, it just clicks in. They get drawn to a certain area, and you just kind of follow where your interests and your passions are. And whether maybe it's just drawing the plants, Maybe it's, making medicine or making food items with the herbs, or, I mean, it can be anything, or working with animals or people, plant communication, or going strictly clinical. So even with all the plant communication work I do, I'm still, I've still studied like clinical herbalism, and it's a combination, like they serve each other, and it's hard for me to separate them out.
Well, it makes it even more relatable, right? Because so many people are in the tangible physical world, right? And that's where most people are at. Say you're slowly disappearing in the dark. Do you happen to have a lamp nearby?
There you go.
Well, that's
it's glaring. I guess. Let's see. Is that better?
better.
Other side. Yeah,
Better.
it's getting cloudy and rainy, so
Okay.
let's see if that works.
Much better. We can at least see you now.
And I got to get the lighting figured out.
I love this. Hopefully we'll have time to come back to this, but I also, keeping the new student in mind, the person who's still kind of trying to find their way. So you were 30 when you went to this gardening class with your friend. What kind of occupation, what kind of work were you doing before that? Did it have anything in the similar field?
No, I came right out of retail. So I went to college and I majored in clinical psychology and went into grad school, into a PhD program, but didn't finish. And then went into retail. And so, executive level retail, like district manager and assistant store manager of a department store. And I did buying. And my hobby was gardening. And so it just kind of, like I said, I went, about the gardening class. And then while I was in herb school, I was still doing the retail. And then doing that, I slowly was like, oh, this is fun. But I did both for a number of years, probably for close to 20 years. The herbalism was, kind of matched with the retail, and even, when I had Gathering Time, Gathering Time was a retail store, retail herb store. So I was able to kind of mash my work background with like my passion to do that. So I think, it's possible to do both, and not everyone, wants to be a clinician and have a private practice, that the demands on that are different. But yeah, it was just one foot in front of the other, and, I just kind of landed where I landed. None of it was thought out, at all. Except on the plants. That came from the plants when I was hiking one day. I'll share this really quick. I had moved to a new area. I'd moved to Marin County, and I was out hiking, and I was ready to give an offering to the land that I was hiking on. And I asked the land and the plants, what would you like as an offering? And the land said, we want you to teach on the native plants that grow in Marin County, and teach a class, pick a plant. You can take a picture of it and then teach on it. And that's how I started teaching the plant journey classes.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, did you grow up in California?
I did. I was raised in Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now you're in Arizona, correct? Just recently?
New Mexico, northern New Mexico. Yeah.
So how is it? I mean, that's a very different environment, isn't it?
It is. It is.
How is it? I mean, new plants, are they just talking to you, or you to them? How's that going?
It's a work in progress. New Mexico's, the language out here is different. The language of the plant, time moves much different in northern New Mexico. The language of the plants is different. The language, if I was back in California, Marin, like the wind blew, I knew what it was saying. The clouds would come in, I knew what it was saying. I could hear all the plants. And I came out here, I could kind of hear, but it was really far away and it was a completely different language. So I'm in process of learning the language. Part of it is the plants started to speak to me in Spanish. So I was having to brush up on my Spanish so I could communicate. And then I did go to an area. I was up in the Taos area, and the plants started speaking to me in English. And it was the first time I'd heard anything in English since I've been here for a couple months. So, I'm learning the language and the ways of how everything moves in this new area. So I'm really excited about it. It's really fascinating.
That sounds like an adventure.
It is. It is. So, and, growing up in Southern California, there are some similarities to the desert here. So some of the plants are familiar. Some, not all. But as you get higher up in elevation, more into the forest, those are the plants that a lot of them that I know from California, from Marin County or from the Sierras.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible to get to know the new plants.
No, not at all. Not at all. And, we used to take people out on herbal camping trips. We go to different areas in the Sierras or Pinnacles. This is in Northern California. And, it's like meeting a new friend. It's like, I'm so curious. If I see a plant I don't know, I want to know who you are, what do you like? Who do you want to grow next to? Who's your companion? What kind of soil do you like? What kind of, light do you like? What kind of water? And just kind of learn. It's to me, it's like meeting a new friend. Mm-hmm. So here there's tons of new friends that I'm getting to know, and they just speak a little bit of a different language. So I'm learning the language. But, I think you can go to any area. I'm very plant centric. And so if I was to travel and land somewhere, the first thing I'm doing is looking at the plants around me, because that's how I'm in the ground, and seeing, oh, who do I know? You look familiar, you're living here, and who don't I know? So it's a work in progress, and so many plants. There's just so much, and so much to learn. It's like never ending.
Mm-hmm. It's fun. It's exciting.
It is.
So you talked about the transition from your previous life in retail to an herbal shop, and you're also teaching and doing consultations. Was that long transition just because herbalism was such a hobby for a long time, or wanting to feel secure that this new life, this new business would be able to support you, or just as people are thinking of transitioning themselves, what might be some of the thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there was there was a confidence thing. I wanted to feel like I knew enough before I put myself out there, and charging money for what I did, I had to grapple with that. But I just kind of put myself out there. And if somebody asked me something I didn't know, I had a really big, I had a network. And so if someone asked me a question, I was just very honest, like, I don't know. I just don't know. Let me refer you to somebody who's more in the know, or let me find out and get back to you. So I think, for me, I just had people just start coming to me. I never advertised, and then it just became word of mouth. And so I did, some people wanted somebody with more experience. I was very honest, like, I've only been doing this like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. This is kind of my area of specialty. Happy to work with you. But it's up to whoever was coming to me. And, some people wanted someone with more experience, so I was happy to refer them to one of my teachers. Some people were fine with it. I think, one of the main things that I found as being a clinician is people just really they have a story to tell, and they want someone who can listen, who feels comfortable to listen to their story without judgment or without overlay. And within telling of their story, what they need comes out, and and then that can get reflected back to help them. But it's kind of like you just kind of, it's a dip your foot into it. And like anything, it takes a while to get known. I think when I moved to Marin from Palo Alto, I think it took me about 2 to 3 years before my name started getting out there and people started to know I was there. And, but things are different now. Like when I started, there was, really I wasn't on the internet. So things are much different. Like it's marketing tools now, you can make yourself more visible and have people find you. I think if someone wants to go the clinician route, I think it's really important to stay, continuing education is huge, and to work and to get into like a clinical program and to maybe work in a clinic and have people there who can supervise you or help you initially. Making product is a lot easier. Like that's for those people who feel like they want to make a product. I had it like a body care product line and an animal care line when I first started. And, that's kind of really easy to jump into. You just need to know your, city, state regulations and get that out. But there's a lot of information out there now. So it's kind of just seeing where, like I said, where you get drawn, and then you just kind of step by step. Working in an herb store, if someone can do it, I think is great. I think Matt started in an herb store as well. It gives you a ton of exposure. I think I probably worked with close to 30,000 people being in an herb store. So a lot of herb stores are shuttering in California. I'm not sure what it looks like in the rest of the US, but getting into an herb store could be a good way to step in and get to know the plants, and then get comfortable working with people too. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you, in hindsight, what would you say to someone who's starting out or at any stage and is having a hard time with charging money?
So, the way I rationalized it was I was charging for my time, not my knowledge, is how I kind of stepped in. And then I also kind of looked out and like, what were people charging in the area that I was living in, and what skill set did they have? Did I have compared to them, and just kind of worked it that way. I also, when I first started, I did by donation only. And I gave, donation only, and then I moved to a sliding scale until I got comfortable asking, for a particular amount of money. So, but it is a process. Some people have no difficulty with it, and, other people do. I think it's really individual. Mm-hmm. But, we all have something to offer that's worth something. And so I encourage people to, take that step and put themselves out there and feel comfortable, asking to be compensated for what you're giving. It's a reciprocal thing anyway. Customers and clients are always offering things back, and then we're offering. It's just an exchange of energy.
Yeah, I can see that easing in, starting with donation and then the sliding scale, and then defining your rate could, especially if someone's uneasy about it, they're still learning, right? Mm-hmm. That seems like a nice progression.
It is, but people are so gracious when they find out you're just learning. They're really happy for you and they want to support you. So people are really wonderful,
Yeah.
when you're first starting out. I think people will find that they're more supported than they think they would be,
So you've worked in the corporate environment and built your own shop and business and done teaching and clinical work. So I think you'd have an interesting perspective, a helpful perspective, if someone hasn't been in one of those environments, working in particular. How would you describe those working environments? Because to me, they seem rather different, especially the corporate to the shop owning and owning your own business, to someone who maybe has no idea of what it's like. Can you shed some light on what they might be able to expect? And maybe even if they're considering if they want to go to college and kind of go the corporate route, but they're in the niggles for herbalism and doing their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, that's a hard question. So, um, when you own your own store, you never have a day off. You're constantly working, and there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that people don't see when they walk into an herb store. There's ordering the herbs, there's stocking the herbs, there's making the medicines depending where you live and what the regulations are. You're making tinctures, salves, creams, infused oils, maybe you're making flower essences. Then there's the whole IT part where you're, the QuickBook programs to run that. Then there's marketing, and I mean, you're wearing many, many different hats. And I think we all have skills in certain areas and some that aren't. I happened to match with someone where our skill sets were in different places. So we just kind of vibed, and, it made it easy. So, and then working with the general public, is huge. And when you have a store, you don't pick and choose who comes into the store. You don't have that ability. You help, at least I did, everyone who came in. I wanted to be of service to everyone who came in. So I think part of it starts out with, where our value system is and how we orient to what we want to do in the world. And so for me, it was very much being of service, being helpful, wanting to make people's lives easier, not harder, and be a support. Because so many people fall through the cracks, with our current medical system, and they'll land in an herb store, and there's generally a story behind how they got there. So a lot of it is like listening and showing up, and being an advocate for your customer, your client. A lot of it is really easy to learn by doing. It can seem really daunting, but if you think you want to open an herb store, I would say, if you can work in an herb store, that would be great. If not, get into some type of retail thing, because it does transfer over. I was in, men's designer clothes for a while. I was in home store. I was in women's ready to wear. And then I got into into the herb store, and it was, retail's retail. So you can do that. As far as production of product, you can hook up with someone, or if there's a teacher or someone who you like, you can ask to apprentice with them or intern with them, and kind of learn by, watching. I apprenticed with Matt many, many years ago. I'd sit in with him while he saw clients, and we do pulse readings and tongue together. So, a part of it's just grabbing as much experience as you can in the area that you're most drawn to, and then just kind of go easy on yourself while you're learning.
That's very helpful. So the corporate lifestyle, is it I've never worked corporate. I've always worked
Oh,
as a self, as in my own business.
yeah.
And so, did you just feel after a while that you're just outgrowing that too?
I mean, for me, being in ready to wear after, however many years I did it, I just felt like I wasn't contributing to society in a way that was fulfilling for me or in a way that was sustainable. The clothing industry, you know, that's a whole nother subject. How products are sourced, is everyone getting fair wages across the board? And the answer is no. So I had a lot of issue with what was happening. And so and then the plant thing just kind of opened up, the herb thing kind of opened up. And so that made it easier for me to do my corporate job because I was, working with the plants and the animals, and I felt like I was contributing to the betterment of society. And with that said, I'm not so harsh on myself. I think I still was contributing to society when I had my corporate job. It just, at that point in my life, the outlook wasn't reading the way that I wanted it to, So, and I considered getting where I'm at. Luck. I think part of it, you have to be honest, I feel very lucky and blessed that things opened up for me the way that they did,
I'm curious. You've taught many students as well. From what I recall, your shop is a shop. You ran your clinical practice there, and then also classes. And speaking about the different opportunities in herbalism, are there, watching students over the years, are there any that you might be able to identify that might fit better at certain stages of life or with certain lifestyles? Like if someone's wondering, I don't know if I want to do this, but I don't know if I can. I know I've never asked this question before, but I imagine you have insight on it.
Yeah, if I think back at students who've come to me for guidance, again, it's like listening to where you're drawn and then starting that. And so if people, want to start working with clients, it's like, I started with family and friends and went out that way. And I think that's a good place to start. What I did find is that a lot of people who ended up in herb school were in some sort of transition phase in their life, and the plants were calling them. And by the end of the school year, after 9 months to 10 months, people knew where they wanted to go with the plants. And if they ever wanted to go with the plants, some people, felt like, well, I got everything I need for now, and I don't know, I'm going to sit on it for a year or two. And then they decide that, that knowledge they're just going to keep for themselves and their family and their friends, and they're not going to progress with it. So I think but I've watched people everyone becomes more empowered. It's like reclaiming of people's voices. And I think, that alone is, I think, huge. The more empowered people we have on the planet and the more people who can speak their truth, I think the better off, we're all going to be. So again, it's very much, just kind of seeing what happens. Because I think sometimes people go into herb school thinking a particular thing, and then part of the way in, they're realizing they're there for a different reason, and that happened with me. I had I was just kind of doing it for fun because I kind of got drawn to it. If someone said at that point, you're going to have a store one day, you're going to be teaching, you're going to have a clinical practice, I would have no, because that wasn't even in my mind at all. I was just getting to know the plants, and it was just more of a personal healing and transformation process I was going through. So I think, it's a little bit different for everybody, but I think most people kind of know deep down why they're studying with the plants, and they may have an idea of what direction. Moving it into a career, is a big step, but herbalism is so much more mainstream now than it was when I started. Um, my family didn't approve of what I was doing. Some of my friends would judge me, and people didn't. The value of it wasn't known or appreciated. And I think now the tides have changed, and so I think it's easier in some ways to move into having a career in herbalism. There's more opportunities now than there were.
How did you deal with that internally, especially? Or how would you coach someone on that?
I mean, in all honesty, it's still a little bit hard, and I've been doing this for almost 30 years, but I think part of it is not looking outside for validation, and not everyone's going to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And at the end of the day, it's more important how I feel about what I'm doing than anyone else around me. But, it can sting a little bit when it's, family or close friends. But, I think part of that's the culture too. Like, it, and just what society values, and how, lineages people are raised in. My dad's mother was from Russia, and she always would have these like home remedies anytime my brother and I would get sick, and they would always work. And, things she learned growing up. And so I had that little bit. My father was a doctor, so kind of indoctrinated into like that kind of field. So I have an appreciation for both. And I think all forms of medicine can complement each other and work together. But there was something about what my grandmother did and the knowledge that she had that I thought was amazing, just amazing. And so some people have that knowledge built into their families. And so maybe not the generation above them, but maybe one or two generations back. And so it can be good to speak to your elders in your family about how they grew up, and what plants, if plants were grown, and what plants did they use, and get information on that lineage to kind of bridge into what you're doing now. Because all of us, prior to medicine, that's pharmaceuticals, we all were using plants. Every culture has always used plants for healing and for medicine. So,
and the pharmaceutical companies,
what was that?
The pharmaceutical companies are still looking for the secrets in plants too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the pharmaceuticals come from plant, a constituent in a plant.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So with all this people you've seen over the years and taught, is there any consistent advice or a question or an answer you've often given that so many people ask in response to what is a very common question that people ask that we haven't covered yet?
I haven't covered yet. I think we've touched on a lot of it. The response. What was? I'm sorry. The response would be like, generally, I come out with like, trust yourself, or like, it sounds like you already know, and just give it a go. Take a step in the direction you want to go, and you can always re-choose. If it feels great, you can continue. If you step in and it's like, that's not quite it, you can re-choose and step out. You can wait some time, make the same choice again, or choose in a different direction. I think being fluid is super important, and just listen. Again, it's that inner listening. And if you feel like you can't hear you can't hear yourself, there's flower essences for that. There's plants for that. Or speak to, one of your teachers, or, um, somebody. There's, people are here to help, and, and if you have a question, reach out. I mean, I remember, again, back in the day, I called Aviva Rome. Like I called information and I got her number. She's an herbalist back east. She's now an MD. And I was thinking about going into midwifery. And I picked up the phone and I called her, and I had like a 2-hour chat and got the information that I wanted, hung up. And I would just reach out to people who I thought had the answers. And I did that with a number of what were considered well-known herbalists at the time. And everybody was always willing to talk to me and help. And I think as herbalists, we're there for each other. And, I've taken time with students and even people I don't know personally to help kind of guide them and give them answers or direct them. So yeah, if you don't know, then just reach out and ask someone for help, or guidance.
And it's so much easier than ever these days. I mean, we have all these social media communities. I mean, even within the Institute, there's a community that you could just tag someone and question goes right to them. Well, that's wonderful. I didn't want to leave that stone unturned. I mean, with you having all that experience there, and I'm excited to hear more through the classes as well. How about we end on some talk about at least an herb? Well, I'm curious, is there something that in your new home, in your new area, is there something that has just been delighting you or just captivating you?
Oh, there's so many. I'll talk about what's outside my front door. Monarda. And
is it a different variety? What variety is it in particular?
I think it's fistulosa.
Okay.
Not 100% sure, but I think that's what it is. And I have Monarda growing out one side of the door and Echinacea growing out the other. And so I'm really big as food is medicine. And so this time of year, so I harvested the leaves and the flowering tops and I dried them. And I'm going to be making gamasio. And so for those, I don't know if people know what gamasio is. It's a type of seasoning blend that you make with like roasted sesame seeds. And I add dried nettle and ground up milk thistle and some nettle seed. So it's like a nutrient type of, and I add seaweed to it. Something that you sprinkle on your food. So it's a way to get the herbs into you. And this time of year, I always put Monarda leaves in there to kind of, just support, kind of warm the body a little bit, aid in circulation. And Monarda is a go-to for me for like prevention for colds and flus. So as we're in that transition time from summer into fall, I put the Monarda leaves and the flowers into the gamasio that I make and use it daily.
I know we featured your recipe before. I think it was during the holiday season. And I want to dig that one up again because that obviously is a favorite of yours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I change the herbs on the, I go by season with the herbs. So every season I put different herbs in. So yeah, I'm happy to mail that to you. I'll email that to you tonight.
What would be neat is to have ideas of your variations on it.
Okay.
By season. Put that up on the blog. There we go. I was searching. I guess we must have sent that out, I think, during the holidays or something. It was a couple years ago. But that would be wonderful because different ways that you can incorporate the herbs just into food. Like you mentioned the garden that you had, right? And just being in contact or around those 200 and some herbs, how you didn't get sick that year or during that time, right?
Yeah. And, it can be the most, like I tell people, like all the spaghetti herbs, your oregano, your sage, thyme, marjoram, basil, rosemary, those are all so good for the respiratory tract. And so this time of year, you want to gather those spaghetti herbs if you're blessed enough to be growing them, or you can get them at a farmer's market or just at a store, and you can do steams with them and, dry them. And I used to love making spice blends for my family. When I first started being an herbalist, I would gift people I would make food product from the herbs, and that's what I would gift people with for like birthdays and anniversaries and holidays. And people love things that are homemade. And there's so much you can do, with the plants. So.
And it's so fun. I enjoy, like, you get out the little jars, you get cute little jars, and, you set aside an amount of time because you don't want to hurry it, right? And it's so therapeutic on multiple levels at various stages.
Yeah. And, and again, there's something wonderful about walking outside the door and picking something, but even making like an infused rosemary olive oil, you can use it internally, you can use it topically. I mean, there's so many uses. So using the herbs as food is a really good kind of entry point into working with the plants as well. And we've all been eating herbs our entire lives,
Totally. I mean, even I was just going to mention garlic. Several weeks ago, I was coming down with a sinus infection, but when I get a sinus infection, it's dry. I don't get mucusy. And so it takes me a while to catch on that that's what I'm experiencing, because it's not mucusy. But I was just craving, my husband had picked up sourdough bread, and I was just craving the sourdough bread with butter and fresh chopped garlic, like not like really coarsely chopped, and a little bit of salt because we use unsalted butter. And I was just eating it. And I asked my husband if he wanted some. He's like, sure. And he took a couple bites and he's like, that's really hot. And I'm like, have some more. It's really good. And I had that for like 2 or 3 days. And then maybe 5 days later, I'm like, oh, that sounds like good. And I couldn't have more than a couple bites. I'm like, yeah, he's right. That was really hot. And I was like, I hope you don't mind, and he loves garlic and onions anyways. He's like, that's fine. You smell great to me.
No, I mean, I go through, there used to be a Chinese restaurant where I lived in Palo Alto, and it was called 40 clove garlic chicken. And if I felt like I was coming down, it was basically a bowl of garlic cloves with maybe 1 or 2 small pieces of chicken. But if I felt I was coming down with something, I would go get that. And by the next day, I would feel great. Like the garlic just kind of burned through whatever was happening. Yeah. So
it's incredible. Or even we come into this time, or the fall, right? When the fall comes. Now we're talking food. I'm going to get hungry here. Even just roasted potatoes with rosemary and garlic, and roasting it all together. And then the garlic kind of gets caramelized, and then butter, and just like smushing it all together. Okay. Now I'm going to make myself hungry.
Yeah, I met an herbalist who would make a savory oatmeal. She'd put that caramelized roasted garlic in there with some other things. And so the oatmeal in the morning was really savory. Because once it's roasted, it's a little sweet, and it still has the properties. So, oh yeah. And now I'm getting hungry too. Now I want garlic.
or I've done it before. It's been a little bit strong for me, but some people do the garlic in the honey, and then they'll put that on toast and things like that. Like you said, we've used herbs for eons. It's first in our foods.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is people don't connect that to medicine or to health, like chicken soup, in the Jewish tradition, if you're sick, that, there's always, chicken soup was the answer for everything. And it really did work, liquefy, if you were congested. And and things like that. Yeah.
We just had our first introduction to health astrology class the other night. We were talking elements and the constitutions. And one of the stories that's worth repeating is my mother-in-law, when I first met her 20 some years ago, or when I first started learning about the elements and constitutions, we were talking about chicken soup, and natural health. And so she has two sons, and my husband was the son that, chicken soup, that's all good. Thank you, But her other son, very different constitution. When he got sick, he wanted chili. And she's a wonderful mother, so she's, even though she's like, oh, I have a white couch and I have white carpet, she still made her son chili, even though he's always on the verge of, it coming up. But it always worked. She said it soothed him, and it was just that was his chicken soup.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
it's amazing. We could talk about this for hours, but yeah, there's so many different foods that, what I'd say, everyday foods that are just really healing, and that can be used just for so many different ailments or things that are going on with us. But that class looked wonderful, and I was so bummed I couldn't get in there. I think elemental theory is huge, and if you understand what fire does in the body, then you can understand how the plants use fire within them too. So yeah, it's great.
it's one of those building blocks in health and wellness that you can address it over and over, and you'll still learn something, it just seeps in a bit deeper. At least in my experience, it's really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree. Sometimes I'll read things that don't make sense, and then a year or two later, it's like, oh, now I get it. So, and that's a lot with herbalism too. Like, I reread things that I've read before, and as our knowledge base increases, we can start putting together different things. So, like you said, I think it's ongoing and endless and fun and
fascinating. Endlessly fascinating. Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
It has been absolutely a delight. Where can people get in touch with you, learn more about you, and even maybe book a consultation?
Yeah, so best way to, I don't have a website. I'm still a little old school. I work at Milagro Herbs in Santa Fe, and you can find me there. You call or come by. I'm there at the end of the week. And then I have my own business called Sacred Rose Herbals, and I do have a Facebook page, so you're welcome to get with me through there or email me at judy@sacredroseherbals.com. And I can get back to you. And happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to us talking about more classes coming up. So stay tuned to more classes with Judy at the Institute as well. It's been a pleasure. Usually we're just getting ready for class. So to actually chat has been very, very lovely.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.